All right, let's pray. I'm going to use a microphone because, it's a power trip. All right, so let's pray. Gracious God, thank you for the gift of the wisdom and the experience and just the know-how that Robin and Susan are bringing tonight. God, just open our hearts and open our minds to receive and to apply the good things that will be shared this evening. God, bless Robin and Susan, and just be with us here tonight. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. Want this?
Thank you. Maybe, I don't know.
Maybe you don't know.
Again, I'm Susan Jones. I'm the Executive Director of Grace Point Counseling Center, which is a ministry of the Woodlands United Methodist Church. Don't be put off by that title. It's just like one of those things you have to have. So I'm a people person as well. So when I was asked to come and do this, I went, there's no better person than Robin to talk about parenting. I know I'm a parent, but she has just been a wonderful resource for me and for our church in terms of parenting and leading parents through. It's just different these days. It's not like it was, in years past. But a little bit about me. I grew up in the Woodlands. I am the mother of four stepdaughters, and a biological daughter. And so I have that unique experience as well. My late husband and I had a management consulting firm for many years. After he passed away, my path took a little different turn, I guess you would say. And so I became interim executive director of the Woodlands. And before I'd been consulting to companies, but to be on hand, God just led me all the way through that difficult experience. And He still leads me. After 2 years with that, I opened my own counseling firm. I'd always had done a little counseling. I became a counselor. Now it's going to date me in 1976, But I'm left and right brain. So when we had our consulting business, I also ran the business part. And our financial guy that helped us after 10 years, he said, "Susan, I'm giving you an MBA for my firm." I really knew what, minuses and pluses were in terms of debits and credits and that type of thing. And so it was just interesting when I reflect back how God led me to certain things in my life. And then now becoming the executive director of the counseling center, I posed God 3 questions. I said, "Okay, God, if you want me to do this at some point in time, Dr. Rob has to ask me. Now remind you." I was telling God this. And then my daughter has to approve of it, and my wonderful friends and colleagues in my business, our business, had to approve of it. They did. That happened in a matter of 5 or 6 weeks. I became the executive director of the counseling center. And through that time, being left and right brain, I do counseling, but also, it's just so wonderful to find people like Robin who share their gifts and talents with me. I don't have to do it all. When I was in a business, my husband and I were in a business, sometimes we were just small, we had to do it all. And so to find gifts of certain people, like Robin, many others, but when I was asked to do this, I just went, "Robin, could you help me out here?" And she is just so passionate about equipping parents. And now these days, it's sometimes grandparents. I have grandparents come into my office. What do I do with this? How do I deal with children? Or I'm taking care of my grandchildren. So Robin just has a very loving, empathic way to teach parents, but also deal with some hardcore things you have to do with children. But it's in a way of helping equip children for the life issues they have. And that's all what we desire. So please welcome Robin. I'll be around to help answer some questions as well, maybe some in terms of my counseling with teenagers, but I think Robin just is going to really give you some good nuggets and a really a broad framework to helping parents and grandparents. So, Robin, thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I'm going to put this here, and I don't know if I'll need it or not, so I'll let you tell me. Excuse me. My name is Robin Nichols. I have a heart for parents. I have a passion for parenting because I am a parent, and I have never gotten over how dang hard it was. So my husband and I got married when we were 30 years old. We had had some success. We'd had some life experience. I had managed people, and I had managed projects, and I had managed programs. And I thought, well, you have these kids, and you just manage them just like you do everything else. And of course, in the old days, they said you have this maternal instinct, and it just kicks in, and you just know what to do. Well, lies, 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 all lies. I was overwhelmed. And also by the belief that everybody else knew how, and I was the one that was struggling with this. So I have never forgotten what a difficult and sometimes lonely experience it was to realize that God had entrusted me with these little things, and probably the only one who knew more than they did, or knew as little as they did, was me. So, and that's why a few years ago, I really had an opportunity to go back and to begin leading parenting classes for families. I work with a program right now called Love and Logic, and most of the things I'm going to be sharing with you today are out of that program. So if I talk about Love and Logic, just know that it's just habit, and kind of don't pay too much attention to that. It's not rocket science. It's not anything that Love and Logic came up with that's magical. You'll hear the same techniques in lots of just really practical parenting authorities. So be prepared for that. And lastly, I really want to share with you some things that you can take home and begin using immediately that might make your parenting experience a little easier. So let's get started. I often think, why is it that parenting is so hard? And certainly when we bring that new baby home from the hospital, we've got this tiny little 6-pound bundle of needs and no ability to communicate very well. They cry, and we guess what it is they need. Sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes we're just guessing, kind of trial and error. Really, the only thing a child that age has any control over is whether or not we get any sleep, right? That just makes it a little more difficult. But as the child grows, by about 18 months, 2 years, we've got this bundle of needs, and now they're learning about wants. So now we've got wants and needs, and we have to kind of figure out which is which and what we respond to and how we respond to that. As they get older, and Lord help us, this crazy world we live in, when my girls, who are now 25 and 21, when they were little, we had 3 rules for things. We said they'll never have a TV or a computer or a telephone in their bedroom. And that worked pretty well for us. These days, though, they've got a handheld device this big, and it's got all those things, and they can put it in their pocket. So I feel for parents who are trying to manage that these days, because I think it makes it more challenging. We live in a world where we are constantly here, don't worry, be happy. If it feels good, do it. We have 100,000 experts on the internet at any one time telling us how to parent, mostly what we're doing wrong. The thing that always amazed me about parenting, you never get a day off. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And really, we don't get any training for parenting. So most of us parent the way we were parented. When I was growing up, my mother was the disciplinarian, but my father yelled. And he was a tall man, about 6'4", probably 250 pounds, and he had this big boom of a voice. And when he yelled, the walls shook. Even if he wasn't yelling at me, I hated that so much. And truth be told, he was kind of a big old teddy bear. But I so hated that yelling, and of course I said, I will never yell at my children. Well, what happened was I found that I've got these children, and when I didn't know what else to do, my mouth would open and my father would come out. And he was just as loud and just as ineffective as he was when I was their age. And what I learned is it's not any more fun being on the yelling end of it than it is being on the being yelled at end of it. So I felt so bad, and I knew there had to be a better way. So I went in search of a better model. I want to share with you Sylvia Rim, who is a pretty well-known child psychologist. She's written a lot of books. I think she was the parenting expert on the Today Show when I was a working mom and didn't know what the Today Show was. So she kind of came up with this idea of the V of love, and I'd like to share it with you. So she says this is a model for how we should parent, and it's a great model for love and logic. So basically, this is a big letter V, and the sides of the V are made up of the limits we set for our children. All of that space inside the V is the amount of control we share with our children. So down here at the bottom, you can see here's our little infant, and that V is very close together. That child has no control. And when my girls were little, I could put them to sleep on their tummy if I thought they slept better that way. Can't even do that anymore, right? Babies sleep on their backs. So that baby, that infant has no control whatsoever. We do everything for them. But in growing to be mature and independent, our limits need to broaden as our child learns to become a little person and they get more and more control. You'll see at the top of our V here, it goes to 18 years when our child is legally an adult. Those years go by really, really quickly. Now, the folks at Love and Logic say we need to operate our homes as much like the real world as possible during those 18 years so our kids have some experience before they go out into the world. And I would have to agree. Kids need lots of experience. And really, we have two choices as parents. We can protect them from the world, and some people try to do that, and it works fairly well for a little while. It's a really big job if you intend to do that for their entire lives. So we can protect them from the world, or we can prepare them for the world. And what I'd like to encourage you to do tonight is think about how you can prepare your child for the world. So there's another model for parenting that I'd like to mention, and it came from the person who, created everything, and that's our Heavenly Father. He gave us this knowledge, these guidelines, right, and did pretty well. He also gave us free will. That's where we kind of messed it up. But He gives us the freedom to mess up and to make mistakes. And He allows us to wallow in the messes that we make in our lives. But He stands beside us. Even if we keep wallowing in the same old mess, He stands beside us. He's patient. He loves us unconditionally. He waits for us to figure it out. He waits for us to gain some wisdom. And I don't know about you, but I'm really happy He doesn't carry around a wooden spoon, because I would have been thwacked more times than I would like to think about. So He just waits patiently. He doesn't love us any less. He just waits for us to figure it out, always there beside us. The other thing He tells us is that relationship is pretty dang important. So that's something else that we really need to remember with our children. It's all about relationship. When we are able to discipline our children without anger, frustration, lectures, threats, without being punitive, without waving that wooden spoon, we're able to make that connection between love and discipline. And just like communication, you and I know that if we get angry with our kids, if we're yelling, if we spank, if they're grounded, whatever it might be, we don't love them any less. We know that. Certainly it's easier to not discipline children at all than to discipline them, right? Discipline feels like a battle most days. We know we don't love them any less, but just like communication, less important than what is said is what is heard. And when we're disciplining with anger and frustration, when our voice is loud, our children don't feel loved the way they do. It's when we discipline and we're calm. So a couple things I think that kind of get parents off on the wrong track and kind of mess us up. I call them mistaken goals. The first is, how many of you have seen the cute little sign that says, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy? Have you seen that? Yeah. Every mama in this room knows that if the kids aren't happy, mama's not happy. And so it's real easy to make it our jobs to make sure the kids are happy. So we run around making sure they don't make any mistakes and they have everything they need and the homework's done and checked and the ones that are wrong are reworked. We work real hard to keep our kids happy. And the truth is, when everybody's happy, life is good. Life is good. Here's the dangerous thing, though. If I got up in the morning and I just wanted to be happy, I would probably shop all day and I'd drink margaritas all night. And I'll tell you what, I'd be happy. I'd be having me some fun, and I'd be enjoying it, and it would last about this long. And probably about the time the visa bill came, all of the negative repercussions of those foolish choices would be setting in. And those are long-term problems I just bought myself with short-term happiness. So ironically, the harder we work to make it our job to keep our kids happy, the less happy kids we have in the long run. And a child who is raised to believe that it's someone else's responsibility to make them happy, or that their greatest priority is to make themselves happy, they grow up to be pretty shallow and selfish and unhappy adults. So it's an easy trap to fall into, but I would caution you, don't go there. The other thing I think that gets us caught off guard is when we strive for perfection. And I tell you, we live in a world where most moms, I think most women, I can't speak for men, but I think it's real easy to compare our first read behind the scenes, our bloopers reel, to somebody else's highlights, right? You look at Facebook and everybody's got the perfect family. You know, here's the mom with 8 kids under 6, and they're all dressed perfectly and they're all posed perfectly, and she's homeschooling, and by the way, she's going to medical school, because it just makes sense, you know? So we look at these facades of what looks perfect on Facebook and social media and TV, and we think, well, why can't we have that too? And so we get really stressed out. We get really stressed out. And here's the thing. A child's job is to learn. They don't come out of the womb knowing everything they need to know to be big. Their job is to learn. And learning is messy and uncertain, and it gets ugly at times. And there is no room for learning in perfection, and there's no room for perfection in learning. So if we're raising a child and our only acceptable outcome is perfection, chances are some children are going to either just shut down and not try, or they're going to learn to cheat, because they sort of realize that the outcome is the most important thing. The end result's the most important thing. Even for children who really buy into that, I can be perfect and I need to be perfect, they pay a high price. That causes a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. There can be emotional and physical ailments that come with that. Interestingly, when my younger daughter, Candace, was in confirmation class, 6th grade, I was a small group leader. And I forgot what we were talking. I forget now what we were talking about one day. But I just wanted to make this point for these kids. And I said, you know, sometimes you look at these other kids and you think, oh, their lives are so perfect. They have all the answers. They have it all figured out. And it just makes you feel less than. I said, what I want you to know is God made you, and you are perfect just the way you are. You don't have to know all the answers. you don't have to be any more perfect than what you are today. Just be encouraged and do your best and know that God loves you. And before I get through with my whole don't be perfect, don't worry about being perfect speech, this other mom stands up and she says, but those other kids only look perfect because they're older. You'll be perfect too. You'll be perfect too. And it was like, oh, you're such a Woodlands mom. Sit down. Because the truth is, we live, and it's not just the Woodlands. There are lots of places like that. I mean, Conroe, and it's so easy in the world we live in to look and see who else has this perfect facade and to find ourselves coming up short. So I would encourage you, and actually in your packet, I think there is an article that talks about character versus GPA. It's a competitive world out there for our kids, so don't get caught into the whole striving for perfection things. It stresses out parents, it stresses out kids. The other thing about perfectionism is it's really hard on relationships. If you've got a child who tries to be perfect all the time, they never really know if I'm loved because of who I am or because what I've achieved. Do you love me because I'm your son or because I scored that touchdown? Do you love me because I'm your daughter or because I have the highest grade in the class? Let kids know that we love them when they're messy, when they're kids. So if we're not striving for perfection and if we're not working so hard to keep our kids happy all the time, what is it we should be embracing as parents? And you're going to like this. This is a lot easier. Mistakes. Mistakes are so awesome because as kids are learning to be big, they're making lots of mistakes. Now, if you're not making mistakes, you already know, right? You're not learning anything new. When I was learning to ski, a friend told me I thought I was doing really well, and he said, Robin, you're not trying hard enough. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, you're not falling down. If you're not falling down when you're learning to ski, you're not trying hard enough. So I kind of gave up skiing. But, but mistakes are good for kids. Poor choices pay off when children learn from them. Misbehavior is a blessing when children learn how to behave from that. So, and if we raise kids who never fall down, because we're right there to make sure they don't, they never learn how to pick themselves up and brush off their knees and go on. And I can tell you, I have known young people, I have a niece particularly, the least little thing, and she would just crumble. She would fall apart because she grew up believing she would have this perfect life and nothing would ever go wrong. And we live in a fallen world. Our kids are going to get knocked down. So we want them to build some strength when they're young. We want them to learn to flex that coping muscle so that they can cope when things don't go well. And we want them to learn how to be resilient. And we only do that if we let them fail, if we let them fall. So we want to build really strong kids. Now, what do we do when our children make mistakes? And trust me, misbehavior is a mistake, right? We're learning how to negotiate with people. We're learning how to get what we need, what we want. So misbehavior is definitely a mistake. We want to respond with empathy. Empathy is the love we demonstrate for our children when they mess up. We're sad for them, whether they've encountered a problem or created a problem. We just want to be sad for them. Because when a child makes a problem, we're going to let the child solve the problem. That's important too. So empathy is the love that links love, or the thing that links love and discipline. We're going to respond with empathy rather than anger. Empathy says, I love you, and it's okay to mess up. It's okay to make mistakes. And it sounds like this. Oh, man, that is so sad. Oh, what a bummer. When my girls were little, my empathetic statement was, oh, honey. And I still say that from time to time. Now we've sort of gotten to the place, we've sort of evolved. We just have kind of a sad face. So they send me emoticons when they're sad, and I send one back because I'm sad for them. Much more important than what you say is how you say it. We just want to be really hurting for our child. And the truth is, unless we're really frustrated with them, most of the time when they're hurting, we're hurting. We're going to do this. This is interactive. Ready? So in your packet, you have an article in there that talks about an empathetic statement. And I think there are a few more examples than the ones I just gave you. But I'd like you to take that out and read through those and pick one that you want to play with for the evening. Or if you think you have another one, you might use that one. So take a minute and then practice it on your neighbor. Make sure you can do it with just a lot of sincerity and sadness.
Is this the thing on page 2, the instant empathetic response?
Yes, the instant empathetic response. I guess there are just a couple examples there, aren't they? This is so sad, bummer, and oh, this is hard. I have a niece who does this one really well. She says, dang.
She said you're not supposed to say
And
I'm
it
sorry,
suits
but
her
just
really
say
well.
I'm so sorry.
Sometimes a grandmother
So it wasn't
will do,
because
oh,
she's
bless
getting
your
it.
heart. Bless your heart.
So you have to be very genuine with it. So, you know, and that's what this, and the book teaches this too. A couple of books. It's like, bummer, you know. Uh-oh, that says it to children, younger children. Uh-oh, but you have to say it your mom, yeah, and it can't be passive aggressive, but it begins to be. I know sometimes as a parent, I remember a couple of times with Kelly as a teenager, I just went quiet because it's so outrageous. It's like, I probably, just shook his head. We'll talk about this later. It was like, I think that's what I did.
Okay, does anybody have one they want to try out for the group?
Right, because you can't say anything like that. That's okay. She's going to talk
Any
about
brave souls out there?
brave soul.
No brave souls?
I'll say one.
Okay, give us one.
My daughter became really, this is when she was older, but, sometimes we say, oh, I'm so sorry, but it's not our fault. But there's a way of saying, I'm sorry. It's empathy, not because you did it. And it's more like, oh my gosh, it's so difficult for you. You're not saying that. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry. So and my training as a counselor is like, don't take ownership. If you're not sorry, you're not sorry. But it had a different connotation.
Yes, sometimes I think if we do it correctly, the child realizes that we're sorry for what they're going through.
Or she's sorry for what I'm experiencing. So, and it's very genuine. It has to be genuine.
Yes, yes.
Not sarcastic.
Sarcasm is the kiss of death. Sarcasm never builds relationships. Anybody else have one they want to try?
Bummer.
Bummer? Who said bummer? Typically, I think men can get away with bummer better than women can. Oh, bummer. And again, it doesn't matter so much what you say. In fact, you can kind of just give a little moan. Oh. You just have to do it with heart. So empathy.
What a mess.
But don't laugh, right? Now, let me tell you how you can do that makes it a little easier to receive is, oh man, what do you think you're going to do about that? Right? Kind of hands the problem back. It's like, we're going to let you own it. We're just going to stand here beside you and love you while you deal with it. Oh man. Empathy opens the mind to thinking and the heart to learning. So when our child messes up, we want to respond with empathy, and then we're going to let the consequences do the teaching. That way, we don't always have to be the bad guy. And we'll talk more about consequences in just a minute. I want to share with you a couple techniques for setting limits, because when we set limits on the front end, it sort of makes life easier in the back end. So let's talk about that. But before we talk about setting limits, we like to teach a technique called going brain dead. So this one is fun, because here's the thing. If you can set a limit and your child can whine and argue and fuss until you give in, just to put an end to the noise, then you've just lost that one. So you've just handed over control to a child. And we don't want to do that. So we're going to learn how to go brain dead. We do this to avoid power struggles. Nobody wins a power struggle. So we just don't want to go there. So also, I think in your packet, you have a page with one-liners, and I think that's the one on top. So to use this technique, you choose a one-liner, and again, it's how you say it. Now this, we want to be just really boring. We want no drama here whatsoever. And this is a technique we use just for us. It's a way of responding to the child without listening too closely to what they're saying. Because if we listen, pretty soon we want to jump in and we start explaining why our way is best. We start explaining why they can't do what it is they want to do. And then the child has control of the situation. So we're just going to go brain dead to keep from getting sucked in. So think of it as a Teflon shield you're putting on. So here's some one-liners. And this is my favorite. I know. This is so unfair. I know. I like that one because I can listen just close enough that if they throw a question at me, I can say, I don't know. How about,
That's good.
maybe so, maybe so. This one's good. What did I say? But I don't want to. What did I say? Again, you just want to be really boring, really dull. Probably so. Everybody else gets to. Probably so. This one I love. I don't use it. When my daughter and I start talking about politics, this one comes up sometimes. I love you too much to argue. Love you too much to argue. Again, you could just have a nice grunt. Oh. Oh. Now, sometimes you'll have a child who will try to manipulate you with something like, you don't love me. And we certainly don't want to say, I know. I mean, that's just mean. So when we have a child who tries to manipulate that way, we want to say, oh, nice try. Nice try. Not getting sucked in. So the whole point is just to turn off our thinking and our listening mechanism. Now, here's where you really see the personality of a child come into play. If you've got a pretty easygoing child, after 2 or 3 tries, they're going to figure out that mom and dad aren't going to play this game, and they're going to go find something else to do. If you've got a strong-willed child, they're not going to stop. And so at some point, and I would say after 20, 30 seconds or so, you're going to want to just turn and walk away. So, because we're just not going to stand here and be a pounding board for this child and their frustrations. So that's how we go brain dead, to make sure we don't get sucked into a power struggle. Let's talk about setting limits. Two great ways to set limits. The first one is with choices. So if we look at our Via Love, we want to make sure that our child isn't headed off to college here at 18 with our money and the keys to their car, and they've had no experience with freedom or making choices. So when they get to college, they're going to be, or move out of our home or wherever they go, they're going to be making some big decisions like, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? How late should I stay out? What am I going to eat? How much am I going to have to drink? Should I be studying? Should I go to class? Lots of expensive decisions get made in those 18, 19, 20. So, and believe it or not, my daughter Candace is a junior at Houston Baptist University. And when we went down there for orientation, you know, they sent the kids off one way and the parents were doing a tour, this, that, or the other. And at one point we had some downtime. We had a few minutes before the next tour started. So we got coffee and there was a big room. Our parents were just kind of sitting around having coffee or a drink of water and talking. And we got to chatting with this woman who was sitting at the table next to us. And she was explaining to us that her son, also an incoming freshman, didn't want to be at Houston Baptist University. He wanted to go to UT where his cousins are. She had completed his college essay, or his college application. She had written his essay, and she had applied for him. And then when he got accepted, she told him where he was going. And then, you know, it got ugly, but by golly, he was there. And then she leaned over and said, but he's not living on campus because he's not ready for that. And I went to say, you know what, honey, he's never going to be ready. He's going to be living with you and his wife and kids. You're going to be taking care of all of them, and you'll be wishing that he'd been ready. So hard to believe at this day and age that we have kids going off to college who didn't do their own applications. But I think it comes back to, are we going to shelter them from the world? Are we going to prepare them for the world? So kind of a fun example. So we want to go back to our Via Love. We want to share lots of control. And we want them to get some experience. And again, experience only really counts if it doesn't go well. If things go really smoothly, sometimes they're lucky. Sometimes they know what they're doing. They have some skills. But kids learn most from when things don't work out. And they learn most from hands-on. They certainly learn by watching us. But we would never take our 16-year-old child, hand him the keys to the car, and let him get behind the wheel without any formal driver's ed training, right? They've been watching us do it since we flipped that car seat around, right? They certainly think they know how to drive. We would never let them do it. And we want to do the same with them leaving home. So we want them to have some hands-on experience. So we're going to give them lots of choices. And here are some guidelines for choices. We never give a choice to a child that creates a problem for anyone other than themselves. We'll let a child create a problem for himself because then he gets the experience of solving the problem. For younger children, we give two options, either of which we're happy with. We don't care what they choose. If the child doesn't choose in 4 or 5 seconds, we'll choose for them. And here's a little trick. We want to choose what we think they would not choose. Because we want children to learn from a really young age. When I have a choice about something that affects my life, I want to take advantage of that choice. We give 99% of choices when things are going well. This is something we use at the front end and not after there's been a misbehavior. We only give choices that fit our value system. We don't disguise choices as threats, because saying to the child, are you going to put on your shoes or do I have to spank you, is not really a choice. And we never give choices when life or limb are in danger. Nothing we talk about involves letting a child make a life-altering decision. So here are some examples of choices. For our young children, we might say, are you going to wear your red shirt or your blue shirt? Do you want milk or juice? Do you want to brush your teeth in your bathroom or my bathroom? Do you want to put on your shoes by yourself, or would you like me to help you? Do you want peas or carrots? Do you want the green cup or the red cup? Are you ready to go now, or do you want to play for 15 more minutes? And we always ask that 15 minutes before we need them to be ready to go, because they will always want to play for 15 more minutes. So, as they get a little older, we can offer them choices like, do you want to start homework or have a snack first? Are you interested in soccer or basketball? Do you want to ride your bike or take the bus to school? Do you want some help with your homework, or would you rather work by yourself? Are you going to be able to play without bickering, or do you need to take this where I can't hear it? Now, we give 99% of our choices when things are going well. So this one's kind of on the edge. Here's how you can make it work. When our irritation level is this high, we can say to children, you want to stop bickering, or you want to take it somewhere I can't hear it? If we wait until we're frustrated, my dad's going to be coming out of my mouth, and that's not good for anybody. So we want to take action when our irritation level is low. By the time our kids are in junior high, choices might sound like, will you be getting up in time to ride the bus in the morning, or are you going to find another way to school? Because whose problem is it for a junior high student to get to school? His, right? Will you be home at 10, or do you think you need another 30 minutes to spend with your friends? Do you want to put your phone in the other room, or just ignore your friends' texts while we're having dinner? Are you going to clean the garage or mow the lawn this week? By the time a child's in high school, they should be making decisions about just about everything that affects their own lives. But at any age, we don't allow a child to make decisions that affect the whole family. Mom and dad get to make those decisions. So choices allow us to share control we don't need with our children, and allows them to get the opportunity to make some decisions, to get some practice. It reduces power struggles. They get practice. I was doing a class about a year ago at the Montgomery County Women's Center, and one week we talked a lot about choices. And the next week, this woman came up to me and she said, I have to let you know, I found the whole conversation about choices so eye-opening. She said, I realized that as a child, I never got to make any choices. Somebody was always telling me what to do. And I'm very much a people pleaser. I was then, I am now, and I was very happy to obey. She said, as I got older, I don't know if it's so much that I didn't have any experience making decisions and I didn't have any confidence, or if I really knew that I should be making decisions about my life. She said, so I really didn't make decisions. But in not making my own decisions, I allowed other people to make decisions for me. And I ended up with some pretty tough situations that as an adult woman, I'm still living with. She said, so, and at that time, I was so proud of her. She had a new job and she was doing well. And she said, for the first time in my life, I'm sober and sane at the same time. I'm not even sure what all that meant, but I was so proud of her, and she was working to get her 10-year-old daughter back. And she said, the most important thing I'm going to do with my daughter is I'm going to teach her to make decisions about what's best for her life, because I don't want her to ever have to go through what I went through. We want kids to learn to listen to that voice in their head that says, what's best for me? What's going to be best for me in this situation? Allowing kids to make choices and some decision making is so important. The other method for setting limits that I want to share with you is one called enforceable statements. And that just means that we say things that we have some control over. So the only thing really we can control in parenting, after our children especially are too big to carry, the only thing we can control is ourselves. And so that's what we want to focus on. So an enforceable statement sounds like, my car's leaving in 15 minutes, rather than, hurry up. Hurry up is just noise, right? So here are some examples. I keep the toys I pick up. You may keep the toys you pick up. Breakfast is served until 7:15. Get all you need to hold you until lunch. Children who brush their teeth without fussing get dessert. Now, in case you think that the child's going to brush their teeth and then we're going to serve a dessert, because a child can remember. So when the child fusses about brushing their teeth, then tomorrow, the next day, when the rest of the family is enjoying dessert, we sadly remind them that children who brush their teeth get to enjoy dessert with the rest of the family. And we're just sad for them because the dessert is really, really good. So how about, I budgeted $40 for your shoes. If you can come up with the rest, you can have the expensive ones you want. This is one of my favorites. I'll read to you as long as your finger is not in your nose. I'll listen when your voice is calm like mine. You may have a cell phone as long as you're paying for it, including the monthly service. You may get online as long as I'm around to supervise. I allow kids to attend concerts when I go along or they're with another adult I trust. I'll be happy to drive you to soccer as soon as your chores are completed. I'm happy to pay for the dental visits when I hear that you're taking good care of your teeth. Otherwise, I'll be deducting it regularly from your allowance. Thanks for letting me know that you watch R-rated movies at your mom's house. We don't watch them here. I'm happy to help with your laundry when I find it in the hamper. Allowance will be distributed on Saturday morning to everyone who has their chores completed. I'll be happy to listen to you as soon as I'm off the phone. We pay college tuition for students that earn A's and B's. I'm happy to lend you my car when it's available and as long as it doesn't cause any problems. I like as long as it doesn't cause any problems, because who gets to decide what a problem is? We get to decide, right? So if our child borrows our car and it comes back without any gasoline in it, what do we call that? A problem. And if there's a speeding ticket, what do we call that? A problem. And a myriad of other things that might be a problem for us that might not be a problem for our child. So it's just, the enforceable statement is just explaining to the child what we will allow or what we will do, and we focus on what we will do because we can control that. Unless we're going to get really forceful and ugly with our children, we can't make them do much of anything. So, now, we've set our limits, and we know that a child's job is to learn and to set limits. And I'm sorry, we're getting very late. So I'm going to give you some guidelines for giving consequences, and then we're going to do questions, okay? So we want to let the consequences do the teaching whenever possible. Sometimes there's a logical consequence. Our 12-year-old daughter, her best friend's having a birthday sleepover party. She's dying to go. Everybody in the neighborhood's talking about it. And we say, you can go if your room's cleaned. The room didn't get cleaned. What are we going to do now? We're going to be sad, aren't we? She's probably going to make sure we're sad. But it's a great thing when kids learn that your yes means yes and your no means no. So here are some guidelines for setting consequences. Not designed to punish the child. Not designed to put them in their place or show them who's boss. To get even. When they're delivered with anger, sarcasm, frustration, it's just starting a fight. Unenforceable consequences are only funny on television. They don't work well in real life. We want to deliver consequences. We want them delivered by a cool, calm, and in-control adult. What happens if you can't find a cool, calm, and in-control adult? You delay the consequence. It sounds something like this. I am very angry right now, and I will do something about this, but I make better decisions when I'm calm. So I'm going to take some time, I'm going to calm down, I'm going to give it some thought, and I'll get back to you. It's very late, I need some sleep, we'll talk about this in the morning. Sometimes it's just, I have no idea what to even think right now. I am speechless, so I'm going to take some time, give it some thought, and I'll get back to you. In your packet is something, I believe, the Love and Logic generic consequence. It talks about an energy drain, which we can use if you don't have any other ideas for a consequence. We've talked a lot about staying calm. Not easy, it takes practice. But here's the thing I want you to think about. When things get hot with your child, do you want to be gasoline or baking soda? We have a few minutes for questions. I'm sorry to take so long.
No worries. So we can go ahead and jump into the questions. If anybody wrote any down, just go ahead and pass. I'll pick them up. But if anybody has any question now that they're willing to ask, just shoot your hand up and go for it. But if you wrote them down, hand them to me. Anybody write me down? Does anybody have any questions?
Let me ask you this. Did anybody hear anything that you can use? Okay.
That's a good one. What did you hear?
I just, I guess allowing them to fail. That's the hardest part.
It is hard.
It's a mean world out there, and I guess by not allowing them to fail, you're setting them up for failure.
Right.
Literally.
Right.
So, yeah.
And we want them to learn to fail. You really can't learn to succeed if you haven't learned to fail. Same way you can't make good decisions till you make bad decisions. It's how we gain wisdom. And so we want them to learn to fail and to learn to get back up when they're in the safety and security of our home. Nobody's going to love them the way we do.
A lot of what I see in my office with parents is fear. I have that too. You just don't want to lose your child, so you're fear-based. And, when you're certainly when they're born, it's like, oh my gosh, I've got to really take care of them. And then somehow when they get to be teenagers, it's like the inverted V, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I'm fearful, like my daughter, the first time she backed out of the driveway with the car, it's like, oh my gosh. A parent's worst nightmare is losing your child, So, but we can't let that fear, if we're fear-based, then it goes over to the child. And the child doesn't learn how to take care of themselves. Now, we can't take care of the outward circumstances. That's outside our control. So, fear is anxiety. And if the worst case happens, then we have to gain the support of community, our church with others, our loving people surround us. But we can't dwell on it. I remember my dad saying one time, it was my time to drive the car someplace. No, something might happen. And first time I stood up to my dad, I would rather die than just stay here in this house, thinking I'll be okay. And he let me go, but I was kind of disrespectful for him, maybe it was, but he gave different thought to it. So parents, you have to deal with your own fears and your insecurities and what might happen. And
what's funny is listening to you, and we have older children, 25, 23, 20-year-old twins, and I'm so much a better parent today than I was way back then. Oh my gosh, I wish I could do it over again. I'm too old, I'm too tired, but I wish I could have backed up and but today I'm so much more calm and so much more grace and forgiveness, and it's just
The little things just aren't that important anymore.
mm-hmm. over here.
Okay, so, this is good on the, talking about the consequence and all. But if you have a child that keeps doing the same thing over and over and over again, and you give a consequence and you feel like it's not doing anything, there's nothing a consequence you can give them that's going to trigger a change.
If the technique you're using is working, you should be using it less. You should have less need to use it. If the same thing is happening over and over again, then you may need to look for a different consequence. And if you've got a strong-willed child, you're just going to have to pray for stamina. Test.
And sometimes there is a need for outside resources.
Yes.
If you have a child that is on the autism spectrum, or has sensory processing disorder, or their personality, just the consequences and the normal range aren't helping, you can talk to a professional about it, be an occupational therapist, a child specialist, a teacher, or a child counselor. There are those times when it falls outside the realm, and don't be embarrassed about that. And maybe just one conversation may say, oh, I will try this. I've had parents who have special, one child's okay, but the other one is like, what you try one day doesn't work the next. They're in a different category. I have a grandchild that way. So I've learned a lot about that.
My younger child, what we didn't know, what got me in this class was a child who went from being the easiest, most content baby in the world. We moved when she was 9 months old, and she cried morning, noon, and night. And that's what drove me to look for some help with parenting. But unfortunately, it took us till she was in about 5th grade to realize she had anxiety, and she didn't like change. Who knew that a 9-month-old would be that aware of what was going on? But she did counseling for probably 6 to 9 months, and I can't believe how well she did. My older daughter now is going to counseling because she thinks it's the coolest thing in the world that somebody will just sit there and listen to you. Whatever you want to talk about. In fact, she's talked to a couple of her friends from high school getting some counseling. She said, Mom, it's the coolest thing. I wish there were like gift cards and you could give it to me.
It's interesting you should say that because I had an adult say the same thing the other day. Just to be with someone, and what we know as counselors, it's the relationship that heals. Jesus had relationships, and it was his relationship that healed, right, Kate? And so counseling is the same way. Sometimes you just need that other person that can sit there, be with you, and listen to you. This is men and women. It's just not women. But when this person said that, I went, that sounds so easy, but it's just different. That unconditional listening, but sometimes challenging that person. So sometimes it's a parenting class, which I know what Robin does so well. She challenges people too. His own form. And these are some of the books that we've been talking about, the Love and Logic books. But there's also Parenting is Hard Work. So I'll put these up here tonight so you all can look at them. And then I have another one that I kind of like. It's, all these are kind of spin-offs, but it's Positive Discipline for Teenagers. And probably the past 6 months I've taken up working with more teenagers and finding it so delightful again. I love teenagers. So, some more questions? Any of you grandparents have questions about maybe you have to kind of fill in a little bit emotionally, or I know sometimes I have questions. What do? You see a child living with their parents and they're a little out of control. Am I supposed to help kind of discipline and put them in line? I've had those questions. Maybe you all don't have that, so let me give you an answer to that. Right. Well, grandparents are so wonderful because it's just, a parent, for the most part, when you have to leave your child with a grandparent, that's the next best thing. It's so unconditional. But a grandparent has a special place. Now, of course, if they're walking across the street and cars are coming, yeah, a grandparent has to say, no, come back in. But for the most part, and I've had situations where the grandparent still has to be the reinforcer. The grandparent should not be in the role of the primary disciplinarian. Or, I have a mom right now whose husband died just of a heart attack, and they're in their 40s. And the younger son is acting out. He's living in a house full of women right now. And the grandparents came in. The grandmother is saying, oh, maybe the granddad could just say, you got to talk to this kid about how rude he's being with the mom. He doesn't want to do that because he's not been firsthand privileged to what's going on. So I agree with him. He still needs to have that special relationship if it's happening in front of him. But I also said sometimes grandparents can kind of role play with their child. Well, how do you handle this, son? Or, sweetie, how do you handle this when kids are making fun of you? You can talk kind of generically when certain emotions are not aroused. That is one thing, that even with parents, when emotions are not aroused, that's the best time to kind of talk about hard topics. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. I think the car, driving in the car, you can't look at them. It's a real safe place to talk about things that are tough to talk about.
So maybe that's one example of what you have to figure out what that special role is. Now, if you're a grandparent and you have primary responsibility for the grandkids, that's maybe a little different role in terms of having to love on them and discipline them. Any other questions? I love your question about, what is succeeding for you.
And yeah, I think we just don't let anything get in the way of the relationship. And the relationship doesn't mean giving in all the time and being a floor mat. We want to be strong because we're modeling how to be strong, successful adults to our kids. So the last thing in the world we want to do is put all our time and energy and money and love into this child and have them grow up to be a doormat for somebody else. So we're not going to be a doormat for our kids. We're going to be strong and take good care of ourselves and teach them how an adult operates.
And kind of contrary to what life used to say for us, it's like the Bible says, don't go to bed with anger. I think that's kind of generic, and a pastor can correct me on that. But sometimes the best thing you can do is step back. You have to come back to it, but you have to cool down, and you have to get back into that frame of reference. What do I need to do to help my child? And you can say, let's just sleep on this, but you do have to come back to it. And I think the other best thing we can, as adults, do, if we're struggling with some of this individually, seek help of a small group, seek help from a pastor, seek help from a counselor.
Excellent. Thanks, guys, so much. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming all the way out here from the Woodlands.
Happy to
Our
do it.
pleasure.
Such a long drive. So, Family Ministries exists. We want to empower and equip families to be the primary sources of spiritual nurture for their children, and this is one of the ways that we do this through these kinds of connect events. This is the second one we've ever done, and I just think it's great. It's wonderful, but we want to make it stronger. We want to. We hope that you guys are feeling empowered and equipped more than you were a couple hours ago, but. Help us make this stronger. Grab the gold sheet that's in your packets there, and you've got a pen there, and if you could fill out this and just let us know how we can empower and equip you better in these ways. That would be wonderful. And then we have some cards or something. Just a small token of appreciation for making the journey up here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Excellent. All right.
One thing that I just thought of, on those, most of those handouts came right off of the Love and Logic website. There are a lot of resources there for parents. There are some for teachers. And most of them are free. So you'll see video clips and lots of articles on how to deal with things. So if you're looking for something, that might be a place you want to check.